Grow Great is a city government leadership podcast with Lisa Norris and me, Randy Cantrell. Each week we share insights, experiences, and wisdom to help you and your leadership grow great. Our website is growgreat.com.
So Don and I are on the road to Oklahoma, and as we always do on the road to Oklahoma, we have great conversation just about a million different things. This conversation, we were just talking, he's been retired for over 2 years now. For the listeners that are newer, he was a floor supervisor for a print operations, they're a global print operation for financial, all your financial statements, bank statements, anything you can think of that you would get at month end, quarter end for businesses, for personal. They print just massive amounts of financial stuff. And so we were talking about people and leading people, which is, of course, our whole podcast is about just leadership. And we were talking about the challenges we'd had over the years on different people. And it really came down to complacency and this lack of self-awareness that you need to do something more. It just kind of, the definition, I had to look it up to see how it was actually defined, but the complacent means being self-satisfied, often without awareness of potential dangers or deficiencies, a state of feeling so pleased with oneself that your situation, you don't feel like you need to improve or try harder. So I thought, okay, so we were talking about this. Now, I wasn't thinking about the actual definition. Don's just talking about, okay, the people, and they're just going about the day-to-day, barely even thinking about what they're doing. They're running the machines, pulling the machines off.
Autopilot.
Autopilot. And I was saying, I've dealt with that too, because it's very easy to get complacent when you're doing, especially, in the HR world, we have a ton of things, and every business does, that you do over and over and over. And maybe it's running quietly and well, but if we don't adapt, we'll die. So there's always changes you need to make yourself better, make yourself more efficient. We're not talking about AI and doing a mini series on AI on this podcast, but that's evolving. So this complacency issue, and we talked about how we addressed it, how you addressed complacency and making sure we're continuing to move forward, continuing to improve, continuing to challenge our staff, and not allowing complacency to sit in. And Don looked at me, goes, "You know what you and Randy need to talk about?" And I said, "No, what?" And he goes, "We're complacency disruptors." And I said, "That sounds amazing." What you're thinking, And he goes, "No, it's just you have to disrupt complacency or it takes precedence. It becomes the business and everybody just runs an autopilot and doesn't look to get better. You have to disrupt it. As great leaders are complacency disruptors." And I thought, what a fantastic topic. And so here we are today, and I'm sure he'll listen and be, wow, he's famous now because he's.
Oh, we've already made him famous.
We have already made him famous. He's pretty famous because he's my husband.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting, Randy, because it doesn't matter the industry. You were, tech kind of industries. You were CEO, private. We're in public and city government. And complacency can be found everywhere. So it's how do you address it? What do you do with it? What are your thoughts? We've talked about a lot about just being disruptors generally to, you got to keep things fresh. You got to keep things moving forward. You cannot sit idle. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on it.
When you first brought it up, we talked about this a week or so ago. And in prep for my first thought when you brought it up was just thinking about the leader thinking about themselves,
right.
Not in a selfish way, but how many times have we talked to people and we've experienced it in our own lives? The leader's complacent, and we still keep focused on leadership and this whole influence and doing for others what they can't do for themselves, and trying to help people grow and improve. And if the leader's not intent on that themselves, then, the crowd's going to follow for sure. So my first thought was the responsibility that we have as leaders to not be complacent with ourselves and our own leadership. And, well, I've got this. I've seen this a million times before.
It's rolling well. Why change it? Right?
Yeah.
Let's just keep doing
I've
what we're
seen
doing.
this a million times before. I used to do. I haven't used this illustration in a long time, but I used to do some facilitations. Whether it was council or director retreats and things. And if you took a traffic investigator and they came upon their 1,000th investigation, and they look at it and they like, I've seen this before, and they don't talk to anybody. They don't look at traffic cameras. They don't talk to any witnesses, and they just, I've got this.
Mm-hmm. It's the same old, same old.
And it could be, but what if it's not?
Mm-hmm.
Or would they be better served if they at least showed their team, this is how a thorough investigation is going to happen? Mm-hmm. And I think so my first thought went to the role of the leader to be that disruptor. But first and foremost, I think it kind of starts at home with yourself.
Well, I remember, it's interesting because I remember a police officer giving me the example early in my career, because, I had to do investigations in the past, like sexual harassment, discrimination. And I always took those very seriously and didn't assume anything. But I remembered when we had a cop we were talking to, and I'm like, man, I mean, you have to do this. I only have to do this every so often, thank goodness. But you probably have to do this in your job every day when you come up on anything, wrecks, shootings, stabbings, homicides, whatever the case is. And I said, what is your approach? And he said, well, Lisa, he said, you need to continue doing that approach, because he said, he gave me the example of a prostitute. He said, you can have a prostitute and they claim rape. And you could think, well, it's a prostitute. Right? And he said, but we look at every case because they're human. So we look at every case, and it might have been rape. It might have been unwanted. You have to look at every circumstance and rule things out and rule things as possibilities. Because he said each case can be different, and they may have claimed it 5 times, but what if the sixth time it was?
Mm-hmm.
We still have a right to protect people. It doesn't matter. And he said we should be defending what's right, regardless of the situation in front of you and life and what they chose. It doesn't matter. They're still human, and there are protections that are afforded to them in certain cases.
But I think that's a burden, especially on experienced leadership.
Sure, exactly. And the point being, he could have been complacent and said, it's a prostitute. It's the same old thing I've seen 50 times.
Yeah.
She's at fault. He's at fault, whoever it was.
Right.
So I think, it goes to say you're exactly right. As leaders, one, if we are complacent, we're not going to be looking for self-improvement. To the point of the definition, then you lose awareness of potential dangers. It talks about dangers or deficiencies. So how can you grow and become a better leader and make your people better people, to our point, to grow great? How can you truly grow them if you yourself think you're fine? Because if you think you're fine and the processes are fine and your people are fine, how are you going to possibly press them forward to become the best version of themselves and help mentor and guide them through things that they don't know about? Because you're likely going to be less engaged. You're not going to try to pursue things. You're not going to have conversations. All of those are critical in great leadership.
Do you think leaders see limits to their capacity? I don't mean that. How could I word that better? Do you think the average leader that you've been around or you've worked with, do you think that they see I'm topped out? Like this is as good as I'm ever going to get?
I see that if they're worried about themselves. I have never seen a high performing leader that is a high performing leader that values growth. Typically, I mean, you can have moments where you stall, but they're always looking to improve. The people that are self-focused, not focused on others, um, the ones that are self-focused, I have seen them get so focused, and I've had many conversations with people over the years. They're focused on their role and what they believe they should be in, not what they want to achieve. It's different.
Mhm.
They see, I should be a blah, 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 and I didn't get it, or I deserve it, or am entitled to it. It's a completely different mindset. And I do think they become complacent. I've seen people that have been enrolled 2 years and think they know it all at that point and they deserve more. And I'm like, you've only scratched the surface on being a great leader because all they've done is check the boxes. I know how to do X, Y, and Z. Check. They don't look at making it better, improving the process, growing their people on that. How can we do it better? Let's present on it to others. What can we do for the departments? I mean, it's very limited. The self-focus distracts to this point, being complacent, not aware of their deficiencies. So
So
they think I'm good and I deserve
how
more.
do you disrupt that for them?
Well, it's challenging because one, there has to be self-awareness. If they have lost self-awareness and believe what they believe and will not come off of that, I have not been able to change that. If
But
I
how do
can,
how do you try?
yeah, from a disruption standpoint, when we're talking about being a disruptor, a few things that I would focus on, and I typically did it with the entire team and individuals, is I always stressed our culture and our values and asked, what are we going to do? What's next? What now? Now that we got this down, now what? How are we going to make this better? What do we do next? How do we need to inform our people? And I try to challenge them and not allow complacency. In other words, we're not, now that it's good, we're not going to sit. What's next? And it's kind of being a change agent, but you don't change for change sakes. You change because you need to change. You change because you need to grow.
Yeah. So if you're the boss of a leader like that, then you just impose your will.
Yeah,
You
that's
you
correct.
just you
What are
just
we
don't.
doing now?
Yeah, you just don't tolerate the complacency. Is
You
the short
cannot let them
answer.
sit. Yeah,
Right.
you cannot
I
let them
agree.
sit. Often they'll go, "Well, what do you want me to do?" I'm like, "No, I'd like you to come up with a plan." So now what? And they're like, "Well, okay, what exactly?" They want steps, they want processes, and they want another checkbox. Okay, I just need to develop a training. Okay, training's developed. Now what?
Yeah, because they want to
You
come back to
know?
you and say, "See, here, I did your checklist here."
That's exactly
Yeah.
right. So it's trying to impose why we're doing this, what makes you better. And you can quickly, it's the whole theory of the bell curve. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when you're talking leadership, 80% of your leaders are going to be in the curve. 80% are going to be in the curve. You're going to have 10% on the front end that are non-performers that they need to fall off the bell. We need to hire somebody different, get them off the bell. And then you have the other side on the right side of the bell that is your high performers. And it's always a very few, it's 10%. I mean, I've never seen an organization where everybody is the best of the best. It just is, it's impractical and it's impossible, really. But you can have a lot of great people developing and trying to become better. It's just the natural bell curve always takes precedence. And it's focusing on those that are willing is what I've learned. I've had hard conversations with those that have become complacent. And unfortunately, what I've seen, and I don't know about you, Randy, they typically think they have achieved it and they're going for the next title. It's all about self. It's not about team. They have lost focus on the team. It's totally either about money, it's about title, it's about what they believe they deserve. And in the end, the long run, often they are not a successful leader. And what I mean by that is they may be a good manager, they create good output, but they certainly aren't going to be a top performing leader or high performing leader that changes people, grows people, and creates a high performing organization, because that is not their focus. Their focus remains on themselves. They don't have self awareness. They don't see their deficiencies. Therefore, they don't think they need to improve. It's everybody else's issue.
Well, I think a big part of that is because in too many organizations, city or private sector, the metrics aren't the output of other people.
Right.
The metrics aren't the team. The
Right.
metrics are it's that to-do list. You know, you and
Right.
I've had this conversation, and it's something that is it's inherently in city government
Right.
for good reason. There's a lot of stuff coming down the conveyor belt that has got to get handled, and it's got to get handled today, and it's got to get handled correctly. And
Right.
it's just this ceaseless flow of stuff, but there's people attached to all these things that are done on this to-do
Yeah.
list. And in too many cases I see in cities, that's not the metric. The metric isn't how great is your team, how
Right.
productive is your team, how capable are your people, what were they able to do a year ago, and today they're capable of much more.
Yeah, and part of, when we talked about what we do to combat complacency, which is obviously our topic, which is, being a complacency disruptor. But you really have to start with how do we limit complacency, really? That's the starting point. You don't want to get there. And then honestly, we don't want to have to get to the point of disruption, but we're going to have to. I mean, you're going to be battling it constantly and need to have awareness. But really, to me, complacency starts if you're not communicating, if your culture's not strong, and if you're not challenging your people. Those kind of things, you have to constantly stress the culture you're trying to achieve so that they don't get complacent, because it never stops. The journey never ends. People say you're running a marathon, not a sprint. In this case, you're running a marathon that's lapping. It's as soon as you get to the finish line, it's a new marathon. You just need to restart because there's another thing that needs to be improved, that needs to be strengthened. You're never finished as a great high performing leader because
No,
you're
in
always
some
looking.
weeks the marathon is a series of sprints.
That's correct.
You know?
That's correct. And it's not about, I had a leader recently say, um, that her city manager, she said she was running a marathon and he was walking behind her, which was a great, and she goes,
Mm-hmm.
well, what do you think about that? And I said, well, that can be absolutely true. Plus you're newer in role. So don't stop running the marathon. But it's good that there's a message there that you need to slow down and just focus on what's important to the city manager. Get the city manager what he needs at 35,000 feet. It doesn't have to go over every task in front of you, but you're going to have to keep running your marathon because you've got a million other things. He doesn't need to understand all those things you're working on, but you're going to have to keep running the marathon. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you're at different places. I walk, on a 5K, I do a fast walk, I jog a little bit. I've got
Yeah.
other friends that run the whole thing. That's fine. We're just in different places. It's not good or bad. So, so those things, and I think the same applies when you're talking complacency. Leaders just need to recognize it and disrupt it. Keep challenges in front of your people, challenge them on strategy, show them the why. Um, if they lack challenges in their job, they're going to become complacent because you're not challenging them to do anything different than the task. You want to get them outside of task mode and into why are we doing this and what can we do better? So that's improvement. Often it's you've got to recognize them for a job well done. Recognize them now. What should we do with it? That was amazing. What else do we need to work on and fix? So you have to constantly challenge your team. You have to recognize burnout, stress. Those things can become complacent because I can't do anymore. I'm just trying to survive today. We're going through that with this workday implementation. I've got people doing two jobs They're implementing the system, which is 30 hours a week, and they've got a 40-hour-a-week job that hasn't changed. So I told them constantly come to me. If you're stressed, let me know. We have created things like I have huge coloring posters we're putting in their areas. Take 5 minutes, walk, go color. Nobody's going to judge you for it. Just you got to give yourself a mental break. So you have to recognize those little things as leaders. And then finally, you've got to stress your culture. Hopefully you have a good one. If it's stagnant, if you're not pressing what we are trying to achieve at a high level as an organization and how you align and why you're valuable, it will get complacent. It will become toxic because you're not stressing the value and aligning your people with the culture. All of those things to me, if you can do that on the front end, will limit, I shouldn't say prevent, it's going to limit your need to disrupt complacency long term because you're going to be curbing it on the front end as a leader.
Thanks for watching and listening to Grow Great, the City Government Leadership Podcast. Our website is growgreat.com. For Lisa Norris, I'm Randy Cantrell. We hope you'll subscribe to the show, and we hope you'll tell a friend.